Okay, welcome back to the channel. A few weeks ago, I told the story of the time that I got a developer job offer revoked. And, that did pretty well, so I thought I'd come back with another story, this time from an earlier period of my life, but a really important time, and if this hadn't happened, I don't think I would have become a software developer. So I'll get to that. But this story is about the time I was homeless in Spain. So to take it back, I was a Spanish major in college. I've talked about that before on the channel. I loved Spanish. I thought I was going to be a linguistics professor, and I had to study abroad as part of my Spanish degree, and I chose to go to Madrid, Spain. Now, I was really intent on becoming fluent, and so I chose to go with a program that not many people from my college chose, and it was through Middlebury College in Vermont, which is one of the best places in the country to learn foreign language, and they really stand out because they don't offer much of a typical experience where they kind of handle everything for you. You're kind of more on your own. And so I had to find my own housing. I couldn't speak English. You sign an agreement where you're not allowed to speak English. And I thought this would be great because I really wanted to become fluent, and I thought that that was the best way. So I went to Spain with Middlebury. Now, as part of finding my own housing, Middlebury agreed to connect me with a few people that had students before and seemed to enjoy it. And so I ended up getting connected with this woman named Angela in Spanish, and she agreed to take me for the semester. Now, I'll admit I came into this with kind of high expectations. In the past when I'd gone to Guatemala and France and lived with families, I'd kind of felt like part of the family. I'd felt like they really wanted to have me there and wanted to learn about my culture, wanted me to see what it was like to be in a real family. And so I came into this situation with Angela and her husband Miguel with pretty high expectations. Now, it didn't take long for it to become clear to me that Angela saw this as more like a business arrangement whereby I could live in their house, they would provide one meal a day, and I could pick lunch or dinner. I always picked dinner, and that otherwise I would have my room, and that was pretty much it. I owed them rent, and that was all. And so I did my best to navigate this. I had Christmas there. They included me for Christmas. I missed Thanksgiving. I spent 5 months with them, and it wasn't bad, but it wasn't all that I'd hoped for, but things were mostly good and cordial. Now, where things started to take a turn was towards the end of the year. So the way that exams work in Spain, or the way that they worked for me at that point, because I was taking classes in a real university, was that my exams were actually after Christmas. So as I mentioned, I had to miss Christmas, which was really sad. It was my first Christmas ever not with my own family, and I basically had this dead period where classes were over but exams hadn't happened yet, and I didn't really have anything to do. It was a 3 or 4 week period. And so in late December, Angela came to me and said, "Hey, there's a new student coming for the new semester, and you're going to have to get out of here." But the problem was that my exams weren't until January 25th, and so that left me with about 3 weeks where I wasn't going to have housing. And so what I discerned had essentially happened was that Angela had gotten the opportunity to take a student for the new semester, but she didn't have room. And so rather than missing out on a whole nother semester of income, she decided to simply kick me out. Now, at this point, I started flipping out. I called my parents. I called everybody I knew. Thankfully, I had done a pretty good job making friends. I didn't make that many friends to the program because they were all from this other college, Middlebury, but I ended up going to a church, making friends there, making friends in class, and also the saving grace of this whole thing was that I have a dear aunt and uncle who lived in Madrid in the 90s, and they still have friends there, and I had met their friends. And so as part of trying to scramble and figure out what I was going to do, I ended up contacting pretty much all of these people, and a lot of them came through in a huge way. I also contacted the school, but because it was around Christmas time, nobody was really around and nobody could really help me, so it was all incumbent upon me to solve this situation and try to figure out how to not be homeless. So I ended up kind of piecing housing together with a combination of friends I'd made, friends of my aunt and uncle, and just other random people. And so there were some times I will never forget. I was with my friend David from England, and he had this really interesting living situation where basically he lived in a 3-bedroom apartment, and the rooms were like all one after the other on one side of the hallway. And there was an Italian couple on one side, a Spanish couple on the other, and then him in the middle. And the room was like maybe half the size of the room that I'm in right now, and I basically just like slept on his floor the night before I had to go take my final. Just crazy stuff like that, but thankfully it all worked out. I ended up getting the opportunity to stay where I was, so I think Angela somehow worked it to where they had an extra room that they could clean out or something, and she said, "Hey, you actually don't have to leave after all." But at that point I'd already arranged pretty much all of the 3 weeks of housing that I needed, and I was actually paying out of the money I'd set aside for college, paying the rent, because this was part of college, right? And so money that would normally go to room and board that I wouldn't really see, I was really aware that I was paying this rent every month. And so I decided to not do that to save money, but also I was kind of annoyed with them for kicking me out with nowhere to go. So what are the takeaways here? I think the big takeaway here, and what I think of whenever I remember the story, is that even when things seem really dire, a lot of times they end up working out. And so it's just a reminder to keep the faith. It's also a reminder of how good it is to have good friends who can help you out when you're in a really tough situation. And like I said at the beginning, I'm not sure I would have become a developer if this hadn't happened. And I know that probably sounds confusing, like what in the world could these possibly have to do with each other? And what ended up happening ultimately was that I thought I wanted to be a linguistics professor when I got to college, as I mentioned, but language majors at my college had to study abroad, and I was double majoring in French and Spanish. So this led to me dropping Spanish, which led to me kind of reevaluating the whole linguistics professor thing, which ultimately led me to a couple jobs that didn't work out. And when those jobs didn't work out, I decided to become a developer. So in my mind, if this hadn't happened, maybe I wouldn't have become a developer. I think kind of the last takeaway is that things tend to work together, at least in my mind. You never know what's going on when you're in a really tough or difficult situation in the moment, but a lot of times looking back, you can see that it was used for good. And I think that was definitely the case in my life. So to the people that helped me, David, Juan, Guillermo, if you're watching this, then thank you so much for helping me out almost 10 years ago now. And if you're still here, this is a very different video for me. I've kind of experimented with some of the more story time type videos, but I make videos about tech, self-improvement, and business. And if you like those things, you'd probably like the rest of my channel. So consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.